Welcome back to the World of the Mind. I'm Dr. Matthew Sharps. This is the second part of our video series on the origins of language and communication. In the first part, we saw that language is essentially unique, at least in aggregate, to human beings. The difficulty with pursuing the origins of language is that everything that may have spoken some kind of language, the other forms of human and hominoid life, the Australopithecines, Homo erectus, and so on and so forth, they're all dead. Whether we killed them or not is up to the individual person, I suppose, to figure that out. But ultimately, we can't get there because nobody who used a proto-language survived. So how then can we understand the origins of true language? Well, the best way we might do that is to look at the evolutionary pressures, the various pressures on life forms that caused animals to learn, if you will, to communicate. What were those pressures? Well, we're going to see something rather interesting. There's a gradual ascent in the utility and flexibility of communicative systems from the more primitive to the more advanced, ultimately to language itself. Now, let me talk briefly first about intention movements. Now, intention movements are communicative, but basically what they do is convey intent or ability. Now, one way I could illustrate this nicely is that some years ago, I was in a Land Rover in South Africa that was charged by a rhinoceros. And he wasn't happy. He'd been trying to get it off, so to speak, with a nice lady rhinoceros who already had a baby rhinoceros. She wasn't particularly interested in him, so he decided to get rid of the big green thing that was following him around too close, and he decided to charge the Land Rover. I got a beautiful picture of him just before he charged. Unfortunately, that was the last picture I had because I was spending some time rolling across the Land Rover in case he tried to get in. If he wanted to get in, I was going to let him. But the point is, I was in no danger at all. No one in that vehicle was in any danger because he charged. It was very impressive. Rhinoceros are very impressive animals. But he veered off a foot and a half before he even touched the vehicle. Now, why would he do that? Well, the fact of the matter is that if you have the ability to fight, if you are a rhinoceros or a buffalo or a tiger or something, you have the ability to fight, however you do it, with a big horn or by stomping on things or by biting them, it's better not to, because they might bite you back, okay? They might attack you back. It's better just to show them what you can do. And that was a very impressive animal thundering toward that vehicle. Now, if he had actually made contact with the steel of that Land Rover, there's a good bet his horn would have fractured. That would have been very, very bad for his future as a rhinoceros. But he veered off at the last moment. He let us know in no uncertain terms that he was a rhinoceros, he was here, and he could do awful things to us, okay? Now, this is the nature of an intention movement. He didn't have to complete his charge, which would have been very bad for us, but, well, actually it wouldn't have been too bad unless he collapsed the fender or something, and you get to hike back through territory infested with African wild dogs, which isn't necessarily a good thing. But the message was sent. The problem with intention movements, though, is there's absolutely room for improvement because the intention movement has to be understood by whoever, whatever, you're communicating with through this movement. Years ago, I was in the Yellowstone National Park. If you've never been there, it's a beautiful place, but it's quite interesting because the air is quite clear. You can be as I was, on a road up above one of these wonderful bisons. Bisons, it was full of bisons. I meant to say basin. It was a basin full of bison. Nice basin here where all these buffalo are running about. And I was probably a mile and a half from them, so I was looking at it through my binoculars, and I saw another tourist and his wife, I would assume his wife anyway, man and woman. Well, he was photographing the bison, the buffalo, the American buffalo, but he didn't have a really good camera outfit. It was one of these little bitty gizmos that back in the day weren't all that great. So he was having to get very close to the buffalo. Now his wife is standing, or whoever the lady was, she's standing over here, and he's approaching the buffalo, and he got awfully damn close. And a young male buffalo got up and started to go through the typical bison routine of attention movements. What he was doing is tossing his head up and forward with these enormous horns, and circling around, and dust is coming up. And basically, he's really conveying a very significant message. I am 2.5 tons of really pissed off hamburger, and I'm very, very pointy up top, and get the hell out of my life, all right? Now, the amazing thing is, the tourist did. And he did everything right, I think. He puts it on the camera so he can see better, and he backs carefully away. So the buffalo's still in sight. He backs for 50, 60 feet, getting back away. So he doesn't want to trip and fall. That could be a real problem. He turns around and he walks very fast away, still looking over his shoulder. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is interesting. Because here's this buffalo, okay? They're descendants they're related to Eurasian buffalo, so there's this kind of animal that has some experience of humans. But the evolutionary links are so far back. And the fact is, here's this animal communicating with this guy, and it's a successful communication. And Homo sapiens sapiens, the wise guy, is moving away from the buffalo. At which point he gave the camera to his wife and ran at top speed back toward the buffalo, toward the full buffalo in full display, the horns, the dust, the jumping up and down. Runs back toward the buffalo to get his picture taken with it. There was not a damn thing I could do. I just put it in gear, drove along until I ran into a ranger, which was nowhere near in time. It was 25 minutes later. Told him there may be a greasy spot back there with a buffalo standing on it. And the ranger kind of went, yeah, well, that happens. And I'm not suggesting the ranger did anything wrong, because this happens all the time. People will, remember a couple with their family standing there as a buffalo walking right toward them, and they're looking with great indignation if anybody said anything. They said, well, we're on the sidewalk. Buffalo do not necessarily respect sidewalks. This again is another issue for later in these videos. Modern humans' response to the natural world, their psychological response. But there's a wonderful image running around on the internet right now. It's computer generated of some buffalo, and it's kind of horrible, really. It's got 3 or 4 little silhouettes of tourists on it, like the victory flags on World War II airplanes is how many the buffalo has gotten. It's fairly sarcastic and sardonic, really. But apparently every year a number of people get very, very close to the big fluffy cows, and all hell breaks loose, and God knows what happens then. Whatever you make the attention movement to has to be smart enough to get it, okay? And that's a major limitation on the nature of the intention movement. There's room for improvement. Okay, but what then do animals evolve toward? Because you can't really evolve intelligence enough to influence your communication in some kind of synchrony, okay? They're not harnessed together. So one way that living creatures developed to communicate was through what I like to call body communication. That's not really a technical term, but it's where you evolve to have a body that communicates. There are all sorts of wonderful examples of this. I don't have a photograph of it, but there's a wonderful tropical butterfly in the great Denver Museum of Science. It's now called the Denver Museum of Science and Technology, used to be natural history. And it's a buffalo. It's a butterfly. Butterflies and buffalo are very different things. This is a butterfly. Big wings, beautiful damn thing, but it's sort of a brownish gray, which is kind of not a great color for a buffalo, for a butterfly. I keep saying that, butterfly. It's got these enormous spots on it, look almost exactly like a cat's eyes. And what this thing has evolved toward is to scare the living hell out of birds, because there it is with its little wings up, looking like a nice edible insect, and your bird comes along and goes, I will murder this butterfly, it's going to eat the butterfly. Butterfly suddenly opens these wings, suddenly this bird is faced with a large and angry tomcat that probably wants to know what the bird tastes like. You can see the birds flying away at top speed. This kind of mimicry is all over the place. There are octopus who can use their chromatophores to display as if they were a bundle of these very deadly sea snakes. Okay? There are large lizards in Australia that leap forward at a predator in a wonderful impersonation of a striking snake. All right? So there's all these ideas that your body can develop in a certain direction that allows you to communicate. And now that also requires that you be dealing with something that isn't going to be so stupid that says, oh, good, let me hold the poisonous sea snake. Okay? There's still room for improvement. But it's certainly better. Okay? One species of crab, interestingly enough, in Japan, has gradually evolved because fishermen didn't want to deal with anything that looked really human. Well, it's gradually evolved to have basically its carapace, its great shield on its body, looks something like a traditional Japanese warrior in his helmet. Okay, because you see the fisherman taking the crabs in. Oh, good, I'm going to eat this. Oh my gosh, this one looks like a samurai. He throws it back. Well, if that one breeds with another one that looks a bit like a samurai, before you know it, you've got crabs that basically look like samurai, and that's exactly what's happened here. The body evolves in a direction that other creatures don't want to muck about with. Right? Now, you can say, well, fair enough. Does the animal intend to do this? Of course not. It doesn't have to. Octopus, fairly intelligent animals, they're interesting animals. They may be able to switch from one kind of imitation to another. But ultimately, if your shell is evolved to look like a kind of human, okay, well, that's depending on the other humans, the fishing people, throwing you back. Now, this is so primitive, you wouldn't think it would have any bearing on human communication, but it absolutely does. Human babies have to turn into adult human beings, and it's an interesting process. If you've ever been around human babies, have you seen them? They're covered with snot, okay? They're not very good at doing anything young, okay? They're quite altricial, which is to say they're not good at doing things young in a motor sense. There are all sorts of antelope and giraffe and things. When they fall out of mom, within a few hours or a few days, they're thundering across the veld, or at least stomping across it in some manner that works. And there's a whole variety of ways living creatures protect their young. That's a completely different topic. But human babies are just not very good at anything except being wet and emitting aromas. All right? So how does a baby keep from being killed? And more than that, how does a baby get what it absolutely has to have? The ability for its perceptual precocity. Babies are born able to learn all sorts of things. They're precocious in that sense. But in a motor sense, no. Babies are not doing kung fu, and they're not running around pole vaulting, all right? How does the baby fill its needs of being alive and having somebody take care of you? And the answer is neoteny. It's a wonderful word, neoteny. The Greek means new surface, okay? But the word neoteny refers to the possession of infantile characteristics. And what are those? Well, it's having a much bigger head for your body size, relatively large paws or hands and feet, okay, relatively compressed body, relatively large eyes, relatively foreshortened muzzle, okay? You would all be able to tell a cute puppy from a fully adult guard dog. The one is cute, the other one is not. Okay. This even works with vehicles. Think about a large four-wheel drive pickup truck as opposed to, you think about the Volkswagen, the old Volkswagen Beetle. Okay, it's a small kind of chunky car with big paws. I mean wheels, big eyes. I mean headlights. Okay, which one is cuter? Okay, you know which car is cuter. The big four-wheel drive truck, not particularly cute. Okay. So this works across a wide variety of stimuli, and what it does in most humans is evoke, and I'm not kidding, it's actually called this, the cute response. You ever seen when somebody brings a baby into the workplace? Okay, suddenly all work stops, everybody surrounds you. Oh, it's a baby. Okay, I'm kind of. It doesn't work on everybody, and there are a lot of women it doesn't work on either. Okay, I'll be standing there. Okay, yes, it's a baby. We can see it's a baby. I mean, if it was an iguana, then it would be time to talk. That's definitely a baby. Okay, but okay, some of us we just don't seem to have it. Everybody's going, oh, it's so cute, and their voices are all over the place. The frequency structure, the pitch of the voices is all over the place. Now, this has been studied, and it's quite fascinating. American English doesn't have a lot of frequency change in the tones of it, okay? But there are other languages that do, okay? Tonal languages of East Asia, there can be 5 or even 8 different tones of pitch of the way you say the word that can change the nature of the word, okay? Well, it turns out that when you look at the sound spectrograph of somebody doing this baby talk thing, and it's rather sexistly called motherese, it turns out that, first of all, that spectrum exceeds the normal level of your frequency changes in your language, okay? Elvis Presley's going to, okay, thank you very much, okay? It's more like, thank you very much, okay? Suddenly we're speaking Swedish, you get the idea. But Swedish has a bit more of a frequency of span than American English does. Well, the point is this. What the people are doing is slightly exceeding the frequency structure of the local language, whether it's an enormously variable frequency structure like some of the East Asian languages, or a more moderately extended frequency structure like you see in some of the Scandinavian languages, etc. What they're doing is slightly exceeding the structure of the local language. And believe it or not, what the kid is doing, what the baby is doing, is forcing the adults to teach it the basis of the language. It's starting to pick up not just the frequency structures, but even things like, we believe, the rhythms and cadences of the local language, just by being that kind of creature. Now, the child certainly doesn't pop out of mom going, yes, I shall go on to learn whatever the language is. It's not doing that intentionally. It's just like those crabs the Japanese fishers are throwing back in the water, and the ones they keep are the ones that don't look as much like a traditional warrior. The cute kids are cute, and people want to take care of them, they want to hold them, they want to pick them up. Now, many people don't. The fact is, over the years, people have handed me babies, and I hand them back, and I'll be someplace else. It doesn't work on everybody, but on most human beings, it does. And as a result, the children don't get eaten, okay, at least not by their parents or their parents' friends. And the children are also taken care of. They're cuddled, which actually helps children to thrive. They're fed, that's an important point, obviously, okay? And the people take care of them until they can begin to take care of themselves and learn the local cultural ways of living. Okay? This is body communication, and it's so primitive. We see it in butterflies. They're sitting there being a nice bird meal, and suddenly, wham, they look like a damn cat, and the bird flies off in a terrible fit of fear. Well, there's not much intelligence going there, is there? All it is sort of a simple instruction. When you're terrified, open your wings. Simple instruction. Well, it isn't even an instruction for the crabs. Just look more like somebody wearing a helmet, and they'll throw you back. Well, the baby, our kind of human, right? The human, the wise person, Homo sapiens sapiens. Well, they're not born very wise. They're just born very damp and smelling quite oddly. And gradually, they learn. They learn through these processes of body communication. The problem is it doesn't always work. Historical and archaeological records are simply filled with human beings, usually not eating their own children, although it does happen, but certainly eating somebody else's. The cute response doesn't always work. Let alone learning a language, you may wind up being the main course. So there's clearly room for improvement here, and we really need that if we're living creatures that have sex. Now, virtually every animate creature that's big enough to see has sex in some form or other, all right? And there are creatures that can reproduce parthenogenetically, literal virgin birth, where they more or less clone themselves, but they're usually things that are under a microscope. If you're running around being a person or a hound dog or whatever it is you are, a gorilla or something, you're going to have sex, and that means you better get it right, because sex, a bit of a crisis point here, sex is extraordinarily dangerous. First of all, you're going to get very, very close to another creature. And if you're a carnivorous creature, you're very close to the other carnivorous creature's mouth. Okay? Secondly, you're going to work yourself into a state of fatigue, possibly an altered state of consciousness, depending how good the sex is. And before you know it, well, you could wind up being the main course yourself, couldn't you? The other thing is, of course, that you and whoever you're having sex with have the same basic disease palette, so you could wind up catching whatever they have. You want to damn well make sure that they're healthy, in part because you've got to raise children, okay? You hear all sorts of rubbish about parental investment in children, but the fact is if the kids don't live to reproductive age themselves, the whole reproductive thing, it just kind of hasn't worked out, has it? All right? So you've got to be demonstrating certain things if you're going to have sex. Now, how is this done? Well, I'm playing a little fast and loose with that because I'm speaking purely from a human standpoint. There are other standpoints. Living creatures reproduce on a spectrum from R strategy reproduction to K strategy reproduction. Now, we're going to be a little fast and loose here with what basically is an entire textbook. But R strat reproducers, as in the word reptile, which isn't quite accurate, but there we are. What they do is they produce a tremendous number of offspring, and they assume a lot of them are going to die, but a few of them will probably make it based largely on random chance. K strat reproducers, like humans, have relatively few offspring, and they invest a lot of parental care in those offspring in the hope of getting them to reproductive success. All right? Now, so lots of bugs are R-strat reproducers. Now, I'm not using the word bug in the correct scientific sense, a particular class of a particular kind of arthropod, the insects, okay, a particular kind of insect. I'm using the word bug in its rather largest popular sense, as in things with too many legs. All right? The mommy wolf spider looks a little fuzzy to you. It turns out she's carrying dozens of offspring on her back like some kind of landing craft. And if somebody stamps on them, the babies are going in all directions like they're invading someplace. All kinds of bugs. And coral reefs are wonderful. You have all those amazing amounts of reproductive material out in the water. Mommy and daddy coral have no idea what's going on. They're R-strat reproducers. Okay? Now, with R-strat reproducers, that means... well, the mommy has to be around at least until the babies are born, depending on whether the babies can take care of themselves or not. But the daddies are somewhat more disposable. Now, that's why female black widows, after they have sex with male black widows, eat them. It gives mommy a very nice meal of exactly the kind of materials you need to make more baby black widows, and before you know it, you've got an infestation. You're going to have to call the exterminator, unless, of course, you have something that you're fond of black widows, and feel free to do that if you want to. Bugs, the males can be disposed of. Now, they don't always work this way. There's one kind of spider, Australian monster, about the size of your hand. Okay, the male's about the size of a BB. He just sneaks in, has sex, and gets off without her even noticing it. But praying mantis, I think, are my favorite example of this, because The male praying mantis courts the female praying mantis, and he does in fact mount her. Now, the female praying mantis's arms are rigged in a way that she can reach back here, and apparently she's fantastically strong by bug standards. Again, the word bug meaning things with too many legs. She can simply rip the male's head right off, and she does, and she eats it. Now, believe it or not, that's fine, because he actually mates better without his head. Okay. This is something you see kind of examples of here and there in the whole phyletic tree, if you want to call it that. Several types of frogs, for example, you destroy part of the brain in the male, it immediately starts looking for a mate, which is interesting. But the point is, he mates better without his head. She then eats the body, and she's got a lovely male to produce the next generation of offspring. Because if there's one thing you could say about things with too many legs, all these bugs, okay, if there's ever a nice hole in your screen door in the spring or summer, you're going to realize this. There are plenty of bugs to go around, okay? But suppose you have to invest too much in either the male or the female to have either one be disposable. At that point, you've got to communicate. And one of the things you've got to communicate about is sex. Now, what you really want to communicate is two things, really. One is, yes, I'm healthy. And number two, I know the social rules for my species. Take ducks. Okay, eastern black ducks. It's getting harder and harder in America, at least, to tell the ducks apart, and I believe elsewhere in the world, because interbreeding between the different species is becoming very difficult. But the black ducks, the male will land beside the female black duck and attempt to make another duck. Now, what she'll do is shake him off and fly off someplace. Well, he flies off right after her. Okay, if she lands, he lands. He tries to make another duck, and away they go. They may fly many, many miles in a single day before she finally permits him to mount and lay eggs, and you wind up with the next generation of ducks. Now, what's going on here? Well, ducks don't have a lot of social rules. Have you ever seen ducks on a pond, someplace where the females can't get out of the way? These nice urban municipal ponds where there's no little creeks to the females to get out of the way of the males. So many males will attack a female sexually, they may literally drown her. That's been seen. But assuming you don't have an awful situation like that, what do you have to do if you're a duck? What do you have to do for a living? Well, one thing, you have to be able to fly long distances in migration. And for another thing, you better be able to fly very, very fast to get away from things that like to eat ducks. Now, what has he just demonstrated? He's demonstrated he's very good at the profession of duckhood. Duckdom, duckism, whatever. He's demonstrated he's awfully good at flying long distances and flying fast, so fair enough, she lets him mate. But jaguars, these mighty cats that used to live as far north as I live here in the American Southwest, they no longer do, and I'm kind of pleased about that, because jaguars are kind of nature's professional wrestlers. They have enormous claws, enormous teeth. They want to know what everything tastes like, and they have no religious sense whatsoever. They are big damn animals, and they need a lot of meat. Okay? Well, these jaguars, therefore, need large territories. Okay? And where they live, they tend to have large territories. And if they meet another jaguar on the border of the territory, there's a tremendous fight. Pieces of jaguar may be flying in all directions, and one of them wins, as demonstrated, okay, fair enough, I get to keep this territory. And it's not really a demonstration. He gets to keep it. He or she gets to keep it, and all the animals in it that they then eat because they are jaguars. But of course, if they meet the opposite sex, same thing. It's just, according to the various zoologists who are jaguar professors, the fight can go on for a very long period of time, with pieces of jaguar flying in all directions. And if they're both still in their pitching by round 15 or whatever it is, they mate. Now, eventually, then they separate, the kids take off and develop their own territories, etc. It's a wonderful world as the professional wrestler with teeth that is the jaguar. But you see what they're doing. What do jaguars do for a living? There's a wonderful old film by the Walt Disney people. I have no idea how they got this shot, but there's a wonderful fish that can be 10 to 12 feet long. It's called a pirarucu. The picture of this amazing jaguar dragging this gigantic thing. My God, it's huge, and just basically beating it to death on a rock in order to, have sushi. Okay, they're incredibly powerful animals, and they demonstrate it. Both male and female demonstrate, yes, I'm good at being a jaguar. I have tremendous endurance, I can endure pain, and I'm very, very strong, and I'm very, very good at the ferocious business of being a jaguar. So we can see that in living creatures that have sex, you want to demonstrate what you are. And humans really do the same sort of thing. Think about humans. First of all, in many human societies, you'd better have a certain level of prosperity to be dateable, I guess we might use the term. Well, you also want to have some degree of health. So what do? We have these amazing products, and now more and more men are starting to use these amazing products, okay? You can have lipstick that changes your lips to a brighter red. Looks like your circulation is better than it really is. Have all sorts of interesting stuff you can grind into your face to get rid of any zits or any marks of zits, etc., etc. You get all sorts of wonderful stuff to make your eyes look bigger and brighter than they would be normally, and tremendous shampoos that can rough into your fur here to get big. You got big damn fur, okay? And so here you are being very, very healthy. And usually, if you go on a date, you don't wear the same, shorts and old t-shirt you wear for gardening, do you? You wear something rather nice, okay? When kids go on proms, okay, to show, look, I am a mateable organism. Hell, they'll even rent clothing, for God's sake. So you have these amazing cultural customs, don't you, to demonstrate your astonishing health, okay? And as to wealth, well, I remember some years ago in a particular chain restaurant that I no longer go to because I'm trying to reach old age. But anyway, the point is I was working late in my laboratory, and not actually being a mad scientist, just a regular one, but I was working late. And a couple come in behind me, dressed very nicely, been to the theater or something, preparing to mate, okay? And their conversation was absolutely amazing, and quite loud, too, okay? So, do you own your own home? Oh, yes. Well, my stocks have been doing very, very well. Yes, well, it's hard to get parts for my very expensive particular type of European car. And if you've ever seen the old Star Trek where they had the communicators and Captain Kirk would flip his communicator open, well, this guy was doing this with his wallet. If you're seeing South American torrent frogs, they make these signals. He's doing this with his wallet, okay? Basically showing her the amazing numbers of gold and platinum credit cards in there. Now, of course, today it's different. This was many years ago. Today, they practically leave you credit cards for free with your breakfast cereal, but back then getting these cards was difficult. He's demonstrating, look, mate with me. I'm dressed right, I have prosperity, and she's dressed, she has tremendous fur, beautiful fur. She'd use a lot of nice fur shampoo, and she'd ground all kinds of crap into both cheeks. She'd look with red lips. And all sorts of interesting supportive garments because, Mr. Gravity is not your friend. The point is that, realistically, do you really believe that anybody looks like that once the makeup comes off? No, but there's two things going on here. One is appeal at almost a semi-conscious level, really, to, wow, this person looks really healthy. The other factor is, of course, they obey the social rules. They know how to obey the social rules. That's critically important. Look for the internet for 2 or 3 minutes. You'll see all these things that both women and men demand, not request, but demand that the opposite sex, if they're heterosexual, demand the opposite sex be doing. Okay? But it's interesting, isn't it? Because not all human societies work the same way. There are societies in which the women select among the possible men, as other customs involved, where the men simply leap up and down off the ground to show that they can leap, okay, and they have tremendous big grins on their faces, their eyes wide open, which shows they don't have various parasites of the mouth and eyes, okay, so you get the health thing going. But look at some settings for young people trying to mate in modern America, okay? They may change the facial color so that they look dead, the colors of a corpse. They may change the face in ways that look somewhat mutilated. A lipstick that looks like possibly the body has asphyxiated. Okay, there's no oxygen at all. Okay, now this and very odd garments, sometimes the cheaper the best, odd by the standards of the larger society. Now that's interesting because it turns out that humans are so flexible that they can tolerate major departures from this idea of I am healthy, I know the social rules, mate with me. Some humans will tolerate, I am aware of the social rules of my group that require me not to have the appearance of health. In fact, I have the opposite appearance. In fact, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and show you that my social rules are completely different. Okay? Remember when I was much, 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 much younger, a good friend of mine dating a lady who kept singing all sorts of extremely bawdy songs, and it could be B-A-W-D-Y, including B-O-D-Y songs, where she was singing about people murdering each other, etc., and her girlfriend and she were laughing like crazy. My friend was basically in shock, and he just pretty much departed from the entire situation. So humans, it's perhaps a bit of tribalism, I don't know. There's different cultures and subcultures will change their physical appearance to obey the social rules, even at the expense of the appearance of ill health. And that's interesting, because it looks like humans are massively more flexible than the other creatures are. We've already seen this in our previous video, haven't we? This idea of analysis in aggregate, really. Gorillas, yes, they can learn to say, please give Coco, give Coco food, give Coco candy. They can say that, but they don't write their sexual desires on bathroom walls. Okay, you're not going to get the richness of human language out of anything other than humans. Whereas we have these rather hair-splitting definitions of what is human, what is not, what is language, what is not. In aggregate, humans are different from anything else. Now that becomes kind of an interesting problem, okay? Because sometimes people get it wrong. Okay? One of the ways I've asked my students, I don't do it much anymore because they get terribly worried, but eye contact is big in sexuality. Well, wrong kind of eye contact, isn't it? You have to learn how to do this. I've seen some middle-aged ladies in France who are actually capable of batting their eyes. I'd read about that. I didn't quite know what it meant, because I've met a few middle-aged ladies in France who can do it. Everybody else is pretty much, there's something wrong with your eye? Okay. So we have all these cultural overlays on our non-linguistic communications. And these may have had major contributors to what ultimately became language. Because as you move from the relatively inflexible, the precursors, the intention movement, or my body is shaped like a certain thing, therefore I'm going to expect, on average, these behaviors out of others, we start to see this amazing flexibility. The problem is, flexibility isn't always in your best interest. Great psychologist, comparative psychologist, Tinbergen, ethologist really. Tinbergen studied what we call supernormal stimuli, okay, of sign stimuli and fixed action patterns. Now, what are these? Sign stimuli are behaviors or body structures, the display of them, that always get the same stereotyped response from some other creature. What then is a fixed action pattern? Well, it's not a very satisfying definition. A fixed action pattern is the behavior pattern that's elicited by a sign stimulus. One of Tinbergen's experiments was, several of them in fact, were with this three-spined stickleback, which is a fish that when the males are getting frisky, they want to have sex with other fish, they basically want to turn bright red. Well, the other males attack bright red. And Tinbergen put artificial red fish into his tanks that were even redder than any fish could be. So they weren't normal, they were supernormal stimuli, and it caused the other fish to attack just like crazy. All right? And you see these sign stimuli and fixed action patterns all over the place. Here where I live in the American West, you've got the red-winged blackbird, okay? And the males come in before the females do, and they display these wonderful red wings at each other, okay? And what they wind up doing is if they're far enough apart, they just give reciprocal display. If they get too close together, one of them will hop and attack the other one, okay? And unless the one who's hopped too close, unless the one who's got the territory is sickly or something, he'll virtually invariably win the competition. It's a way basically of setting up your real estate. When the females come in later, the blackbirds are ready for life. Now, if you've ever bought a house in California, you fill out this much paperwork and you're only half done. These blackbirds are basically working out their territory simply by displaying their red wings at each other. Okay? And it's not just birds. Consider the gibbons that used to be around in Southeast Asia. There's still a few of them here and there. In the morning, they give this enormous call, this enormous hooting call, and it causes them to go toward the nearest other pair of gibbons. The males, an anthropology professor of mine used the term, I'm not sure where he got it from, but the idea of gibbon chicken. The males goes thundering down through the trees, and one of them veers off, and whoever veers off first loses that tree. Gibbons are primarily frugivorous. They eat fruit, and jungles are not as full of fruit as you might think, so they want a big territory, and this pair of gibbons chases that pair of gibbons out by losing the trees. My God, don't they fall out of the trees? Well, a wonderful scientist named Carpenter many years ago looked at male gibbons, and it turns out they fall out of the trees all the damn time. They've got all sorts of broken bones from this, but it's important enough. This communication. What does that have to do with sign stimuli? There's nothing. You're not seeing anything like red wings. No, but you're hearing it. You're hearing the great call, and it causes the fixed action pattern going toward the nearest other gibbons. Even gorillas, highly intelligent creatures. I cannot attest to this myself, but my reading in the literature is that the gorilla Coco, who learned American Sign Language, was capable of an IQ doing an IQ test in the high 70s. And IQ tests are really prejudiced against gorillas. For example, one test she took, one particular mental test she took, you have to pick the one that you would eat, and one is an ice cream cone and one's a flower. She picked them both because she eats flowers all the time, for she is a gorilla. Well, of course, she got marked down on that one. So she may be higher than the high 70s, because this is a smart animal. But yet, when they breed, well, gorilla breeding is a bit of a problem, because you can be places in Africa there has never been a gorilla, and they'll still talk about the gorillas attacking, local women, etc. A male gorilla's penis, it's okay to say penis, this is YouTube. A male gorilla's penis is about fully erect, it's about 2 inches long. The active copulation takes about 15 seconds. These are not sexy animals. But to copulate correctly, they have to go through a whole sequence here of rolling, pushing each other back and forth, and doing all sorts of things. They have to get it, and apparently, usually, they try to get it in order. Okay, gorilla attack sequence is really something. They do a very specific series of behaviors before they'll finally attack. Now, humans don't do this. A good friend of mine recently retired as a senior police commander, and he could speak with some experience on this. Human beings don't go through a whole bunch of steps before they attack each other. In certain bars, they'll go, what are you looking at? Oh, I'm not looking at anything. Suddenly they attack each other, and before he retired, my friend would take them apart and take them off to the hooskow, right? Well, gorillas are incredibly strong. If male gorillas are going to fight, one of them may die or be very seriously injured, but they're both going to be seriously injured. And in K-strategy reproducers, high-level K-strat reproducers like gorillas, you don't have enough males. You don't want them injured. So they give each other every chance to back down. Humans do not. Which is one of the reasons that it's a bit of a pity, I suppose, that the humans have the automatic rifles and the nuclear weapons. It would be a lot safer if the gorillas had them, but they don't, so that's where we are. How did humans, my gosh, how did we not develop this? Well, humans aren't as strong as gorillas until humans invent the technologies that allow humans to murder each other in wholesale lots. Humans weren't really dangerous. This is our hypothesis anyway. Humans weren't really dangerous enough to require a series of steps of going back and forth. Look at my shoulders, I'm a mighty gorilla, and then pulling up grass and throwing it in the air, and then finally doing it, say, bring up and charging. And you can, by the way, once they've done the chest pounding thing, and you can hear it for a very long way, you can't stop the charge, but you can stop them from killing you by basically making a nice submissive gesture, and then the gorilla may push you and go something. But you can, they'll eventually they've got ways of making a peace treaty, so to speak, that human beings really do not, because human beings are a very flexible kind of creature. We have gone far beyond science-stimulated fixed action patterns and the sexual things you have to do. But the fact of the matter is, we're not quite to language yet, because many creatures encounter dangers in the world. They require behaviors that, frankly, are almost linguistic. And this is the most complex system of communication we're going to talk about, the call system. Call systems are used, for example, in wolves. They have specific calls to when they're hunting something like a moose, to see somebody else come and chase it for a change, etc., etc. The calls are so specific that humans can interpret them. Right? The vervet monkeys that I did my first master's thesis with, they had one of the most complex call systems in the world. We were very, very happy about our vervets being able to do this, and I can't possibly give the calls, they're sort of chirping noises I can't possibly make, but the calls are very specific to different kinds of predators. Right? They make a call for a ground predator, and if they hear that call, they'll swarm up a tree and get up into a lovely crotch of the tree. If they hear a call for snake predator, they're basically different words, if you want to use that term. We always say call, they're different, it's different calls. First of all, they stand up and they look around like crazy for the snake. If they can find it, most snakes are not exactly gallopers, so the vervets may be able to get out of the way, or some of the brave ones may pull the snake's tail or bite it or something. But if they can't find it, and you can play these calls, we did it with tape recorders, they'll swarm up the tree. But they won't stop in at the bole of the tree. They'll get on a branch where, frankly, they're in a little bit of danger there. They might fall out of the branch. But a big snake, something like a python or something, can wrap itself around the tree and send part of its body out there. If they're too close to the tree, it'll get them. So they go out there. There's another call for birds. Okay, and in most places in the world there are monkeys. There's some kind of mighty monkey-eating eagle, the battledore, for example, in Africa. You don't want to be on the ground because the eagle may hit you at a couple hundred miles an hour, and that pretty much ruins your monkey Christmas. Okay, so what you would do is get up in the tree, but you huddle very close to the bole of the tree so the great predator can't sweep you out of the tree. Now, I've never seen this. I've just heard of it, so I don't know if it's true at all. But supposedly the vervets will get into the core of the tree, and supposedly some kinds of these birds will land and come walking in toward, I'm going to bite some monkeys and eat them. Supposedly, I'm not endorsing this, I don't know, but what I have heard is the monkeys will then sometimes pull all the feathers out of the bird and push it out of the tree, so that takes care of that. These calls are very specific. Okay. Now, we were so proud of our vervets. We were working with the species. They've got the call system. We're kind of going, go vervets, go vervets. Well, it turned out that the American prairie dog does the same thing. Those little chirps it makes. And prairie dogs are not smart animals. You go, yeah, vervets, they look like us. They're kind of like us. They're monkeys. Hooray for the monkeys. Hooray for the primates. These damn squirrels, they're no smarter than the squirrels. My guess is what they think about is peanuts, okay? But compress this amazing amount of information into little calls. It's not only what kind of predator are we facing, rattlesnake or whatever else, but they even encode information about its course and speed. So it turns out that vervets, now, if you've ever worked with monkeys, they are far more intelligent than any rodent. I myself have worked with a number of unpleasant rodents and even more unpleasant monkeys. What I can tell you is the monkeys are a lot smarter, and they have interesting ideas involving teeth. Monkeys are nothing to mess with. There's also a phenomenon, if I never hear about ballistic urination again, I'll be quite happy. But the point is, the damn rodents aren't all that smart. But they have a call system, a very sophisticated one. Monkeys are that smart. They have a call system, but as we saw in our last video, the first part of this video, the first part of this series on language, it's neither open nor productive. They can't get all the infinity of possibilities in there as language can. They can't say new things. The helicopters that came over the compound I was working with these monkeys in, the monkeys never once did they look up and identify the ship. Hey, UH-1, Bell UH-1 gunship conversion. They didn't do that, okay? It was just eagle, eagle, eagle. They were giving the aerial predator call. Since there was no place to climb, they just swarm around the compound. They were very upset by this giant twin-engine eagle with its machine guns. Fortunately, it wasn't focused on the monkeys. But they couldn't. There was no way for them to open the universe up and to express this. And they couldn't think in terms of displacement either. They couldn't think about the bananas of tomorrow or the bananas of yesteryear. It's right now. And this is where the precursors of language stop, I'm afraid. It turns out that creatures of very limited intelligence are very capable of creating calls and using sign stimuli and fixed action patterns and making use of body communication they may not even be aware they have, and even of intention movements, although you rather want to make sure the tourist you're charging at understands what the intention movement means. Well, all these factors ultimately show the need for two things. First of all is the ability to communicate both with other members of your species and with those outside your species that might interrupt your courtship in their Land Rover if you're a rhinoceros. You have to be able to handle that. But secondly, there's room for improvement as we move from the relative non-specificity of the intention movement right up to the extraordinarily high specificity of the call system. This is this kind of predator, this is that kind of predator, and in the damn prairie dogs, apparently it's this kind of predator moving at 6 knots on bearing 315. Now, they can't say that, can they? They can't give you course and speed in that sense, but they are making use of these chirps and cheeps to give you vital information. Now, the gap between something like a call system in apes and the finale, really, of human language, it's millions upon millions of years. We don't know how big that gap is, but we do know this. Humans are so flexible that even in the relatively primitive realm of sexuality, humans will adopt sexual customs that are so different from what you'd expect them to be that a primary variable there is culture. Culture isn't going anywhere without language. Language, and our brains are especially evolved for language, our Broca's area, our Wernicke's area, language allows us to think with great precision. Okay? It's not just a question of being able to chip the stone tools, it's a question of being able to, for Unga here, to tell Oog here what they're doing wrong chipping the stone tools. You're going to have to be flexible enough if eventually you're going to want you go from the stone tool here, the stone spearhead, to the 12-gauge shotgun. Language becomes part and parcel of human culture and of human thought. And if we're going to make sense out of this, we have to look a little further into just how language is used, its evolutionary significance, and its significance in thought. And we'll be continuing this with further videos in this series. I'm Dr. Matthew Sharps. This is The World of the Mind. I hope you'll subscribe if you feel like it. And, well, have a good day.